Cue up one shining moment. It is finally time to crown our national champion.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Schade. The final preview episode of the college basketball season as we're going to take a look at the national championship matchup tonight. And then we're going to have months and months of off-season content. Very excited for that as the transfer portal is already red hot right now in college basketball. Weird they're happening at the same time, but that's a conversation for another time. Folks, as a reminder, you can listen to the show ad-free on Amazon Music. Also want to give a special shout out to our everyday listeners, those of you who've been with us throughout the 2024-25 college basketball season, and those of you hanging out with us on the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. If you're ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed, then head over to turbotax.com today and get matched with your expert. Isaac, number one seed Florida Gators out of the West region taking on the number one seeded Houston Cougars out of the Midwest region. This game tonight, Monday, 8:50 p.m. Eastern time. The game will be on CBS. FanDuel's favoring Florida by 1.5. We're going to talk about how we got here. We're going to talk about what a win would mean for either of these programs. We'll talk about some statistical similarities, differences between these two teams. We'll give you our X factors. We'll also give you our picks for who we think is going to win this one. And then we'll be joined in the final segment by DeShaun Tate, a college basketball analyst who also hosts the Locked On Atlanta Hawks post-game show. Very excited to have him on. He is in San Antonio at the games. Should be able to provide some great insight for us to close out the show. But Isaac, let's start, before we get into our picks, before we get into the X factors, things of that nature, let's start just talking about what a win would mean for either of these programs. We've got a veteran coach, we got a younger coach, we got a program who's won it before, a program who has not won it before. There's a lot of different kind of angles in terms of what this game would mean for these two programs.
Andy, I think the place we got to start is we got a Cinderella matchup here. The number 3 overall seed against the number 4 overall seed. Just crazy. Shocking given the way this tournament has gone. It was clearly going to be the number 1 overall Auburn Tigers against the number 2 overall Duke Blue Devils. And so, I mean, just the crazy.
Who could have possibly seen 2 1 seeds matching up in the national championship?
I mean, I'm shook, Andy. I can't believe Cinderella's still dancing in this thing after all the chalk. Look, Craig, you said it. Houston, I think a lot of people maybe think back to Phi Slamma Jamma and think, well, surely Hakeem the Dream and all those guys won, right? It's like, no, never did. They made it, pretty far, but just never were able to get up over the top. Kelvin Sampson never been able to get up over the top. Excuse me, I've got some kind of something in my throat. There we go. But for Andy, I think this is a bigger deal for Houston in terms of what it means for not only each program, but for each coach, right? Kelvin Sampson, a lifer, been doing this for so long, had really strong teams at both Indiana. I can't imagine what would have happened to Indiana if he was still there, and at Oklahoma, and now has had so many good teams at Houston, multiple times derailed by injuries or other things similar to that. That we don't know how, those teams might have turned out, but here he sits on the precipice of maybe doing it for the first time. And so I just think for the history of Houston getting their first national championship and Kelvin Sampson getting his, I think it probably to me means more for the Cougars.
Yeah, I think it's hard to not pick them. I mean, you have an older coach who's got fewer opportunities to be back in this position. Todd Golden, he's only in his 6th year as a head coach at the D1 level, only his 3rd year at Florida. So certainly very possible that he gets back to this opportunity. It's not to say that it's not possible for Sampson to get back, but he's 69 years old. So, the opportunities are just a bit more limited for him going forward. Houston also has just dealt with an aggravating amount of injuries in the recent NCAA tournaments, the injury to Marcus Sasser, the injury to Jamal Schade last year. We were worried it was going to happen again when JoJo Tugler went down early in the game against Duke, but Houston obviously found a way to win that game despite overwhelming odds against them throughout that contest. And it does feel kind of like this is this is, I don't want to say it's the last stand for Houston by any stretch, but this is the best opportunity. They've overcome tremendous amounts of adversity. Close game against Gonzaga, the incredibly close game against Purdue, beat a tough Tennessee team, came back from down double digits for most of the second half against Duke. Like, when you consider the coaching differences, the age of Kelvin Sampson versus the fact that Florida's has 2 national championships in the last 2 decades. Like they won back-to-back under Billy Donovan. Like, I know they haven't really been back as a super relevant program since then, and certainly since Donovan left. But to me, this means a lot more to Houston, the program, to Sampson, the coach. And I think that there's a real chance that could impact how this game goes, just because of how much they really need it. And Isaac, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the actual play styles and what we might see in this game on Monday night. And I think we talked about it a little bit with Kylan Mills and Monique Billings on the Bracket Breakdown show, which is available on the Amazon Fire TVs for those of you who have it. But one of the things that really stands out to me is the pace that these two teams play at. You've got a Houston team that's 360th in the country in pace, 360th. Like they're going to go as slow as they possibly can. This has always been their MO. They try to slow the opponents down. They're highly efficient. Teams that play slow and are very efficient tend to be really good, especially if they can clean up on the glass, which Houston can do. Meanwhile, Florida is 69th in their tempo, according to Ken Palm. So this is a team that loves to get up and down the floor. They like to run a lot more. And to me, there's going to be a lot of things that have an impact in this game: offensive rebounding, Walter Clayton, how Houston defends him, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I think pace is going to be, if not the biggest factor in this game, one of the biggest factors in determining who wins this one.
And Andy, you just said, I mean, with Walter Clayton, somebody showed me a picture earlier today as we record that when he transferred from Iona to Florida, he was like, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I can't remember which of the major recruiting services it was, but he was like the 69th ranked transfer in that class. And here he said, like, how, regular do we see stuff like this? I think of John Tonje this year, who was a complete afterthought as a transfer, that kind of thing. But here he sits, man, like on what you have, kind of described as a bit of a Kemba run here. Andy, you mentioned it, but if you are Kelvin Sampson, if you're the Houston Cougars, what would you do to, as I think you have said on one of the 8,000 shows we've recorded this week, you said, I don't know that they can stop Walter Clayton necessarily, but maybe you can hope to at least slow him down a little bit. Like what on earth would you do?
Yeah, Auburn tried everything. As our friend Brandon Olson, the host of Locked On Gators, said on their post-game show on Saturday night, he said, they threw the kitchen sink at him too. Like, not everything but the kitchen sink. It was everything and the kitchen sink. They tried everything, every defensive scheme that they could, and they were not able to slow him down. Now, Houston is a very, very good defensive team. They're a better defensive team than Auburn, but they're going to struggle as well. And I'm curious if we'll see. I mean, Cooper Flagg went out and got 27, but it wasn't a super efficient 27 for Duke against Houston. And Houston did a good job of kind of shutting down more or less everybody else. I know Con Knippel had a good offensive game, but again, there was only one field goal made by Duke in the last 10 and a half minutes of that game. Houston's defense put the absolute clamps on in the second half. I don't think they'll be able to do that to Walter Clayton. I just don't envision Walter Clayton going 10 minutes without a field goal or with only one field goal in the second half. Like, I just don't see that happening. Everything we've seen from him in this tournament run doesn't seem to point to a player who's going to disappear down the stretch. So what does that mean for Houston? I think you try Uzan on him. He's a little bit bigger. I think you try to get the ball out of his hands, whether that's quick double teams flashing at him,
which is what they do.
Right. It's what they do. And I think it could work in the sense of throwing Clayton off his rhythm, but he's not going to go like 0 for 12 or anything like that. Like, he's still going to get his buckets, and Florida can beat you in other ways. And I think for Houston, you have to start with Clayton. You have to make him uncomfortable as best you can. And then from there, you got to hope that you can, keep them off the offensive glass, and you can prevent their bigs from getting going, especially the bigs who can space the floor a little bit. That could pull Houston away from the rim, which could hurt them from a rebounding perspective, because Florida's also a great offensive rebounding team. So there's kind of a lot of different things that go into it. But at the end of the day, if you don't prioritize figuring out how the heck to slow, not stop, slow Walter Clayton down, you're not going to be the one cutting down the nets.
No, not at all. And it's almost like, they're Auburn did a good job of, for the most part of that game, rendering Florida's front court not good. I don't know how else to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like, if you're Houston, do you really challenge the guards, force them to give it up, and then see if the bigs could beat you one-on-one or something like that, right? Like, how do Tugler and Roberts and Francis, how can they hold up against the Condon, Hauk, Handlocked, and Chinyelu front line there? I wonder if that might end up determining it, because Houston decides that they want to refuse to let the backcourt beat them.
Yeah, and I think you look at the Auburn game and you see that, I mean, Florida's front court didn't do great offensively against Auburn. Thomas Hauk had an okay game. Condon was effectively a non-factor. Handlockton didn't play very much. Chinyelu had a very good game in terms of his impact on this game, his physicality and his offensive rebounding, but he didn't score a lot either. And Florida was able to beat Auburn and lead for most of that game without getting a whole lot from their four front court players. So we know they can win that way. And I think that'll be the case. I think Houston will slow down that front court. I really believe that Florida's front court is not going to have a super big impact in terms of scoring in this game. I think they'll impact the game in a lot of other ways. But, the key for Houston in my mind is, in that game against Auburn, Florida, Clayton and Elijah Martin combined for 51. If those guys combine for 51, if Clayton gets a 30-burger again, that's going to be really hard for Houston to beat, even if they are able to neutralize the front court. Because, again, Florida won a game without their front court doing a whole lot offensively against an incredibly good Auburn team. They're more than capable of doing it again against Houston.
Andy, this is going to be electric. No real injuries of note. I mean, we are watching. You mentioned the Tugler ankle thing. We wonder how much of Condon's ineffectiveness lately has been from his ankle tweak. But outside of that, there's nothing critical that we know of injury wise. Also, I liked when you said Condon was effectively, and you said a non-factor. Golden opportunity to call him effectively ineffective. Maybe hit that next time around.
Next year.
Just file that away. Yep, there you go. Andy, the three-point line, I think, is critical in this game as well. Obviously, we know how strong Houston is, just right there at the top of the nation in three-point percentage. Not high crazy volume with it, though. Florida will be interesting because they've got a bunch of dudes that can fill it up. We saw in the Elite Eight game where they had multiple threes from the bigs as well. So the three-point line itself, just that line, it could be an X factor on the Alamo Dome floor there.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very interested to see how the three-point shooting plays out in a game where we've seen it be a valuable weapon for both teams in a certain way, but certainly Houston has the advantage in terms of being so elite defensively, whereas Florida's significantly more inconsistent as a three-point shooting team. So I think if they're able to neutralize their shooters, which Clayton, again, doesn't look like he's particularly easy to neutralize, but if they can force Florida in an off-shooting night, that's a huge advantage for the Cougs.
Okay, so Andy, maybe the three-point line is a statistical X factor. Who are going to be the player X factors, and what are our predictions for how this game is going to go? We're going to have that conversation and much more coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. But now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. And you need it today because tax day is about 10 days away, Andy. It's less than at this point. An expert, by the way, who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on the other parts of your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything. And best of all, they'll do that with 100% accuracy. All of that so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worrying. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert right now on TurboTax.com, only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Andy, lots of great storylines. That was a really fun conversation. But now we need to turn our attention to the X Factor players in this game. We obviously know about the LJ Cryer. We know about the Walter Clayton. We expect one of those two guys to be the MOP of this whole thing. But who's going to be the guy that comes alongside of one of them to really stamp their mark on this championship game? Who's the X Factor for you in tonight's national championship game?
I'm going with Alex Condon, and not as much of like I think he's going to be the second best player for Florida type of thing, but more of like he hasn't played very well in this NCAA tournament. And I think that his skill set is so valuable for Florida in really any matchup, but particularly in a matchup against Houston, where, these Houston bigs are more than capable of defending away from the rim. I don't want to paint them as like a Donovan Clingan type or somebody where you're like, okay, if we can pull them away from the rim, maybe we can have some success. These guys are great at that. And look no further than the defense Juwan Roberts played against Cooper Flagg on that final possession, where he was just right in his grill and managed to do it without fouling. But Houston's an electric rebounding team, and Florida's a very good offensive rebounding team. And I think if Alex Condon can be pulled away from the rim, can space the floor, pull one of the bigs with him, that could allow Florida to potentially get some more opportunities on the offensive glass. Beyond that, again, I mentioned Condon not playing very well lately. He's been dealing with, I think, an injury and some confidence issues since coming back from that injury. He had a good game in their first game against Norfolk State, but since then, Condon has been nowhere close to the player we're used to seeing him be. In these 4 games for Florida, he's averaging less than 5 points a game, about 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, but 2.3 turnovers. He's shot 5 of 12 on 2-point attempts. He's 1 of 5 from 3. Isaac, he's 6 of 14 from the free throw line. This dude is just not able to put the ball in the net right now. If Alex Condon is a non-factor offensively, if he's effectively ineffective in this game, as we said earlier, I think that's a huge problem for Florida. We know Tommy Houck has been great. We spoke with Monique Billings on the Bracket Breakdown show about whether she thought it would make sense to make a starting lineup change. And she said kind of what we agreed with, of like, it's too late, that's more likely to be disruptive than it is to be helpful at this point in the season. But you got to roll with the guys who got you there. But Condon, he's got to find a way to step up for Florida to win this game.
Yeah, I completely agree, Andy. Look, if you were telling me 6 of 14 from the 3-point line, that's fantastic. But at the free throw line, it is utterly woeful. Andy, for my X factor, I'm going to go with Emmanuel Sharp. This dude has been so clutch for Houston, it feels like, and let's use the Duke game as an example of that. We all remember the Tugler tip dunk that brought it within 1. We remember the Juwan Roberts clutch 1-and-1 free throws, making both of those to give Houston that lead for good there. But prior to those 4 points, Juwan Roberts had scored Emmanuel Sharp had scored the last 9 for the Houston Cougars, Andy, including that pivotal 3-pointer just right before that cut the lead to 3 with about 33 seconds to go. So you see all that from him and you're like, okay, this dude can step up and be that. It doesn't have to be LJ Cryer. It doesn't have whatever it is. But also, Sharp is an 86.4% career free throw shooter, has missed just 40 free throws in his 3 years of college so far, and he's 87.4% this year. On the season, Andy, this season, 41.5% from 3 on 5.8 attempts per game. We talked about that 3-point line as an X factor. Well, he's a critical part of that. And he's been doing great in the postseason. He's had at least 16 points in 6 of their 8 postseason games. That's including the Big 12 tournament, and has made multiple threes in 7 of their 8 postseason games, Andy. And so, yes, we're watching for LJ Cryer, but man, I think Emmanuel Sharp might not just be a Robin to that Batman, but could be Bateman if you've seen those commercials going during March Madness. Andy, great stuff there. I love those X Factor picks. All right, FanDuel, you said it earlier, Andy, they have Florida -1.5 as the favorites here to cut down the nets and be your 2025 national champions. Would be their 3rd since the 2006 Final Four. Andy, who are you going with tonight?
I'm taking Houston, so obviously taking Houston to win and to cover, clearly, since Florida is the favorite team here. And I had Houston in my original bracket, the only bracket that I submitted for the Locked On Challenge, as well as for the Locked On College Basketball Discord. Shout out to those of you who are in that bracket challenge with us. I had Houston over Florida, so why wouldn't I stick with that if we're already at the point where we got Florida and Houston squaring off? If for those of you who fill out brackets on ESPN, you know that it asks you for the tiebreaker for total points scored. I had that at 134, so I figured I'll give you a score prediction. Houston 69, Florida 65. That feels like a reasonable score prediction and would also equal exactly 134. So why not stick with my guns, make a prediction that would perfectly favor me in that situation. I think that both teams are certainly capable of winning this game, and Walter Clayton obviously is an incredibly dynamic player and a difficult guard for any team in college basketball. But Houston just kind of feels like the team of destiny right now, especially with that comeback win over Duke. And I think this is the year that Kelvin Sampson finally gets that ring. I think this is the year that Houston finally gets that championship. I think Florida and Todd Golden will probably be back in this position in the not too distant future, but I think this is the year for the Cougs.
And I like the way you put that there, that they're kind of a team of destiny. And it's, we had talked about Duke as feeling inevitable, but, we've kind of had some conversations now about how Houston kind of feels like that run for the 2018 Virginia Cavaliers, not coming off of losing to a 16 seed, but that crazy win over Purdue, the win over Auburn, coming back to beat Texas Tech in the national championship. I mean, it's a lot of that similar stuff that we've seen. Hanging on versus Gonzaga. Gonzaga had that shot to tie it late. Then in the Sweet 16, needing that great baseline out of bounds play to win against Purdue, coming back to beat that same Texas Tech team. I mean, it's just that they've done it and done it and done it. And obviously then in the Final Four, how, Andy, I still cannot figure out how they came back to beat Duke. It's crazy. But I think you might be right. It might be a team of destiny, as Marty McFly's dad said in Back to the Future. "You're my density," I think is what he accidentally said to the love interest there. But seriously, I think this is Houston's moment. I love that for Kelvin Sampson. Not anything anti Todd Golden. I like to see when dudes who have given their life to this thing, it's like, let's get you a championship, man. And I think that would be only fitting. Give me Florida to win. Houston to win this thing, and then therefore obviously cover. So sorry yet again to our guy Brandon Olson, the host of Locked On Gators.
He's not going to be happy with us, but if he wins, I'm sure he'll let us know about it as soon as that game is over, and we expect nothing less from you, B.O. Love you, buddy. Isaac, we're going to be joined here by DeShaun Tate coming up to close out the show. He's live in San Antonio, going to talk to us about some of the press conferences he's attended, the vibes in the Alamo Dome, and kind of give us some of his picks and X factors for this game as well. All of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. My wife and I always want to make sure that we are on the same page when it comes to our finances. And thankfully with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, folks, joined now by DeShaun Tate. DeShaun is a college basketball analyst. He is also the host of the Locked On Hawks postcast show with our girl, Tanitra Batiste, who we were just hanging out with in Dallas as part of the bracket breakdown shows for Amazon Fire TV. DeShaun, so glad to have you on the show. You are out in San Antonio, going to the press conferences, talking to the players. We love to have your insight on the show. Want to kind of start just by asking about some of the interviews you were able to conduct on Sunday between these games with Florida and Houston now advancing. Kind of, what did you kind of learn from some of these pressers, from some of the players on Sunday?
Definitely took a lot from, Houston, where I had the opportunity to ask in one of the breakout sessions, one of the starters and captains, Jawan Roberts, a little bit about comparing their lack of size, where Duke obviously has the advantage, but Duke's lack of experience, where Houston actually has that. And he was just kind of talking about, having, it's all about heart and obviously defense. And I think that kind of says something to me because of the fact that there's so many teams whose mindsets are to have more points than the other team at the end of the game. And that's how you win the basketball game. And I understand that. However, Houston kind of appears that they have the mentality that, you have more points at the end of the game than the other team because of the stops that you were able to get during the duration of the game. So some of that I definitely, was definitely worth, note taking and so forth. And then, definitely asking Condon up a little bit about the shooting and how some of these guys, as you can imagine, with the, dome, shooting in a dome versus the arena, and how, I was actually kind of quite surprised to find out that for a lot of these guys, it's more about the muscle memory from perimeter shooters and things of that nature, where they know how far the ball is from the basket. So, the basket is from where you're shooting from. And so I thought that was really interesting to hear, because you don't have a lot of time to think about it. All just to come full circle and find out that actually shooting the ball from the free throw line, where you're out there on an island and have time to think about it, i.e., Tyrese Proctor and some of the others, is where it becomes a little bit more difficult. So I thought that was really kind of interesting. Other things too as well, but those were two things that kind of stuck out like a sore thumb.
Man, very much so. DeShaun, I'm really curious. Like, post game, we were talking to the host of Locked On Cougs, Parker Ainsworth, who does a great job covering things. He was actually in the Dome as well on Saturday night, and one of the things he was saying is that it felt like for a lot of the game, it was kind of odd energy in the Dome, and then all of a sudden, when it got to that point where we had about a minute 15 to go, right as after that technical foul on JoJo Tugler reaching across the line, and things really got going, it was like all of a sudden the energy just picked up. What was your experience on Saturday night with that?
It did. It did. I mean, it got to a point where you almost kind of started to realize that Duke at one point was going to run away with this game. I'm like, listen, if they don't go up by 20 to 25 when they have their chances, you're leaving Houston and putting them in a position to where they can actually make a run and come back, or just stick around. As long as they're sticking around, they probably love their chances a lot more. Not just but love their chances of being able to win a basketball game. I mean, we've seen that against Texas Tech, where unfortunately they weren't able to come away with the win. But we saw the game that Houston had against Purdue, where they were on the road. I think it kind of gave them a little bit of help by playing a basketball game on a football field, where maybe some of the other teams within the tournament of the other three didn't necessarily have those chances. So it kind of they got adjusted maybe just a little bit more. And then obviously playing up against a rugged team that's very defensive minded, like a Tennessee team, but still able to get them out the way so they can win in a plethora of different ways. I don't think that this is necessarily a Houston team, as to where they feel like there's only one way that they can win, and that's just by muck it up style and playing really good defense. I mean, they held Duke to one field goal in 10 minutes of play, and that being the last 10 minutes of play, just a three-pointer by Cooper Flagg. And so when you put guys like Maluach in positions to where he doesn't have a single rebound, he's the biggest guy on the court, and by far on top of that, considering Houston's size. So I think that says something. But just as far as the vibe, the atmosphere, the energy, it just really kind of felt like Duke isn't going to lose this game. And then it turned into, well, there's no way that Duke could lose this game, right? And then it's like, oh my God, Duke's about to win it, about to lose this game. And so when all those things happen, it happens so fast, but yet so slow, in slow motion. I think we all kind of go through things in life sometimes where something's literally happening right before our eyes, and it's like it's happening in slow motion when it's really happening in fast motion. Before you know it, one guy gets a turnover, Duke can't inbound the ball, or one of the players from Houston ends up getting a tip dunk at one point in time, and then a free throw missed by Duke, and then you start really realizing that this is getting ready to be a real thing. And so you just kind of saw the environment change. And of course, I'm sure you still got some Florida fans, and you still got some Auburn fans that everybody likes to see Duke lose. That's just the way that it is. And now they're all of a sudden Cougars fans.
Well, I want to talk about this championship matchup, because we have this Houston team that's obviously coming off this very emotional win, this incredible comeback win, a team that, if there's any team that's equipped to kind of regroup and refocus and be prepared for a game after such an emotional win, I feel like it's Kelvin Sampson and this Houston team. They just seem so prepared and experienced and everything you kind of need to be able to rebound from that. But I wanted to ask you, DeShaun, who your X factor or X factors are in this upcoming matchup between the Gators and the Cougars, and then before we let you go, give us a shout on who you think is going to win this thing. We got Florida as the 1.5 point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel. So curious to hear your thoughts on that and some X factors in this game.
Yeah, I think that Will Richard for Florida, he is the one missing piece of the, three-headed monster, or the trio, or the big three, to go along with the experienced guards that we know is, is such a big part of the NCAA tournament and success and teams that win national championships. We already know what what Clayton is, right? I think for most people, and I guess we know our answer now, but the conversation going into the tournament and just the Final Four in general was, we know that Cooper Flagg's probably going to be the number one top guy, and that Janai Broome is going to be right there as the runner-up for National Player of the Year. But when I ask people about who that third player is, everybody kind of seems like they're scratching their heads and swallowing their spit almost. Nobody knows who that is. It's Walter Clayton now at this point. But I really think that they can't just, especially with Houston's ability to play defense, Richard is probably going to have to end up being that guy that is the X factor to provide a little bit of help with what Martin is able to do from an experience standpoint, because he's been here before. As far as Houston goes, I'm not sure they have as much of a prototypical X factor, if you will. Maybe perhaps that guy is Milos Uzan. I'll kind of relieve the LJ Cryer and what have you of duties sometimes with being able to handle the basketball, and it won't be as much pressure on Cryer. We talk so much about, the job that Clayton was able to do and the records that he set and everything else in this tournament within the Final Four specifically, but not as much about what Cryer did. I mean, Cryer had a fantastic game of almost 30 points himself. So that matchup between the two guards, Clayton and Cryer, who actually has the national championship with Baylor already, I think ultimately is going to be the matchups to watch. But certainly Uzan and Richard, I think, are the X factors here.
Great stuff, DeShaun. Thank you so much. It's great to hear those insights from you there inside the building. Hope it's a great rest of the Sunday for you, wrapping up and doing some Hall of Fame stuff. And I know it's going to be an electric night inside the Alamo Dome on Monday, man. Enjoy every second of it.
For sure. No, I appreciate you guys for having me. You guys do such a great job, and big fans of the work that you guys do as well. By the way, I'm taking Houston on this one, and I put Houston in my bracket from the very beginning. No whiteout, no scratching anything out, no rough draft brackets. I only do one. So no, I definitely just thought that it was time for Kelvin Sampson to finally push through of all the things that he's had to endure with his time at Indiana, obviously his time at Oklahoma as well. One of the more underrated and underappreciated coaches in college basketball, and it's good to see someone like a Hall of Fame coach like him to be able to get his due, and I'm rolling with the Cougars.
Thanks again to DeShaun for joining us. It's great to have him on, Andy, for the first time. Looking forward to more coverage from him both now and in the future. Great to have him as part of the Locked On College Basketball family. Guys, that's it for today's show. Getting ready for tonight's national championship game. We got a whole ton of coverage tonight. We've got a postcast we're going to do with Kylan Mills and Mo Bills for the bracket breakdown for Amazon. So make sure to check that out on Fire devices. Folks, go ahead and make plans right now to join us live tonight later on after the game to celebrate either the Gators or Cougs getting a national championship. Man, if you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube, make sure you do that. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, do that as well. That link is in the show notes, and it's absolutely free to be a part of. As always, we got to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Pope. Shouts to our guy, Mick Bruins. And until tonight, when we talk again and crown the 25 national champion, we'll talk soon. Peace.